All right, so here we are. Welcome in day 4 of our 40-day walk through Abraham's story in the Bible, going step by step through the story. And we're here to solve a mystery. Why we're doing this is because God calls Abraham his friend, and yet his life is full of missteps and mistakes. So the mystery is, how can someone be so messed up and still be considered God's friend? All right, and that's the mystery we got to solve. Asking for a friend, not for me, but for other people, right? So yeah, we're here in day 4, and it's not Abraham's best day. All right, this is not his best day, but it's a great day for us to get a little window into what a life of actual faith, walking with God might truly look like, based on what, the not the best example today. But I actually love that. I love that we're not seeing an airbrushed Abraham. We're seeing a real guy who's in a real tight situation, is somewhat of his own creation. All right, so let's take a look at it. Day 4, I've got a reading guide open here to day 4. We're looking at Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 20. And today we're going to see some circumstances beyond his control prompt Abram to leave for Egypt, where a deep insecurity opens the door to a dark choice. And so buckle up. Here we go. So what we're going to do, I'll read and then we're going to react. We react by grabbing our highlighters, green, yellow, red. Highlight what you love in green. Highlight something that's got you curious or you want to know more about in yellow. And then something that you don't like, that bothers you, highlight it in red. Green, yellow, red. Get your highlighters ready while I go ahead and read this for us. Again, we're looking today at Genesis 12, 10 through 20. Any old Bible works. We got your reading guide like I do here. You can use that too. Here's how it goes. At that time, a severe famine struck the land of Canaan, forcing Abram to go down to Egypt, where he lived as a foreigner. As he was approaching the border of Egypt, Abram said to his wife Sarah, "Look, you're a very beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife. Let's kill him, then we can have her. So please tell them you are my sister. Then they will spare my life and treat me well because of their interest in you.' And sure enough, when Abram arrived in Egypt, everyone noticed Sarai's beauty. When the palace officials saw her, they sang her praises to Pharaoh, their king, and Sarai was taken into his palace. Then Pharaoh gave Abram many gifts because of her: sheep, goats, cattle, male, female, donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. But the Lord sent terrible plagues upon Pharaoh and his household because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh summoned Abram and accused him sharply. 'What have you done to me?' he demanded. 'Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister and allow me to take her as my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her and get out of here.' Pharaoh ordered some of his men to escort them, and he sent Abram out of the country along with his wife and all his possessions." Again, that's Genesis 12, 10 through 20. And I'm reading this with a little smile in my voice and a chuckle, not because it's funny, but it's because it's ridiculous. What is happening here? There is so much going on. There's so much not to like about this story. All right. So while you think about your green, yellow, reds, I'll share mine in a minute. But first, let me do a little bit to set up where we are. First of all, where we are in the story, right? Remember yesterday, Abram and his whole entourage are down in the Negev, which is the southern desert of what we know as Israel, the promised land, right? He's kind of there moving from place to place. He's got all his flocks and herds, and so that's what he does. He goes from place to place. Well, then, as we saw today, right, in the story, there's a severe famine. All right, severe, a heavy famine is the word here. That's what the word severe here means. It forces Abram to go down to Egypt because they're just short on water, which means they're short on food, and perhaps if they don't do something about it, short on life, right? So that's the setup here. First of all, I got to show you this though. Get the picture. Here's Abram, all right, and his family. This is from more of a modern day photo of Bedouin. This could be Abraham, pretty much, and his tribe as they're rolling through the desert. So that's them. And here's where they end up. Yeah, they end up in Egypt, and if they got as far down as Giza, they would have seen these guys, the pyramids. Abraham right now, Abram and Sarai, we're at right about 2100 BC, like on the timeline, and the pyramids have already been around for hundreds of years at this point. Believe it or not, that's how old they are. Isn't that wild? So picture you're Abram, and here you are rolling up with your tents and your flocks and your herds, and you're showing up at a place like this. I mean, talk about being scared. Talk about being feeling overwhelmed, outmatched, right? And so, Abram does some stuff here. You're going, what is wrong with you, dude? But man, doesn't that happen to us when we feel like our back's against the wall? We're in a place we don't want to be. Circumstances are kind of out of control. And it's very easy. We start to, since the circumstances are beyond our control, we start to feel like our behavior is outside of our control. Even though that's not true, we start to, you start to get all sweaty. You start to make decisions that are not great. And that's what happens to Abram here. So let me show you this. So migrating to Egypt because of a famine is not an unusual thing. Take a look at this. This papyrus comes from maybe about 500 years after Abraham, but documents from about Abraham's time exist. This is the real deal. And there are records of the Egyptians letting Bedouin tribes from the desert into their borders to escape famine. And that's what this record right here, and others similar to it, show. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then because of the little details in the Bible's account, we might actually be able to pinpoint where Abram's terrible idea to talk Sarah into kind of lying about her identity and their relationship may have happened. Right here, take a look at this. So take a look at this. We got this blue line going across here. This is the likely route for Abram and his entourage as they're coming out of the Negev. It's an ancient road called the Way of Shur, very common route into Egypt if you're coming from the desert areas of the Negev and places like that. And history tells us that this was the border checkpoint during Abraham's lifetime. If you're going to cross officially into the border of Egypt, you're going to do it right here at this spot. It's Jeku, all right? And this is the border crossing. And this is the moment right here in the story where Abram gets a little bit sweaty, right? It says they're coming up to the borders of Egypt, and this is where he's hatching his plan, all right? And the plan, infamous plan, right? That's got all kinds of problems here. Okay, so which gets me into our green, yellow, reds, our highlights for today. Let me show you my what could be a red highlight, but it's not mine, and I'll tell you why. Okay, first of all, it's a huge red highlight. This whole situation here with how Sarai gets treated is just, I mean, what? She's getting, she's asked to lie. She's definitely treated like, her values coming from her physical attributes. So she must have been a very beautiful woman, but that doesn't justify any of what's going on with her, right? So you read that and go, red flag, red highlight all over the place. And if you highlight that as red, it's fine. I have another one that's giving me more trouble. But let me tell you this, though. This brings up a good point right here we got to get into for a second. When you come across a moment like this in the Bible, and hey, there are plenty of them. There are plenty of them in even Abraham's story, right? And you can think to yourself, a lot of people do. They go, hey, look at that. It's in the Bible. And isn't that just sick and twisted? And how could the Bible, present this as a way to behave? And you got to back up and go, whoa, 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 whoa. Just because something is in the Bible doesn't mean that God agrees with it. All right. He's just telling the story of how this plays out. In fact, there are only 4 chapters in the entire Bible, all right, where everything we read is something that God agrees with. It's the first 2 chapters and the last 2. Everything else is an absolute mixed bag. So don't fall into that. That's kind of a little, classic mistake when you read the Bible and go, well, there's all kinds of stuff in the Bible here. Look at the crazy stuff they allowed back then. But don't think for a second, don't fall into the trap and go, well, there's the Bible out there just agreeing with mistreatment of women and all of it. Like no, it's not. He's not agreeing with that at all. In fact, it's a plot point in the story here about that gets Abram into some really hot water. Okay, now can I show you my red? I think this is worse. All right, not because we're not because Sarah getting mistreated is bad, but like I said, I can handle that because people being people. But this right here, this bothers me, and it's this right here, this severe famine, that comes into the land of Canaan, forcing Abram to go down to Egypt. I don't like this, all right? Didn't we just read that God's supposed to be blessing Abram? So what are we doing with the famine out here in Canaan? Like, what's up with that? Isn't Abram supposed to be in Canaan, right? And God's supposed to be blessing him. And so this creates some, I'm being honest with you, right? This creates some real tension for me that I can't fully answer right here. I got to just sit with it. And then I got to let that tension guide my thinking and reflection about this whole story a little bit, right? And the only thing I can really come up with is that for sure in this moment is that there must be something up with what I think of when I think blessing and what God thinks of when he thinks blessing. It's like in The Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. There's got to be something up with that. Again, I don't like it. That's why I highlighted it red. That bothers me, all right? I'm allowed to be bothered by it. I'm supposed to react to what I read in the Bible, and it's supposed to make me think. So right now I'm just going, apparently when God says, I will bless you, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to smooth out all obstacles. Apparently famine and getting forced to, or at least feeling like he's forced to go down to Egypt is in some way inside of this promise that God made to bless Abraham. I didn't say I like it, but I'm saying it's there. Okay, how about a yellow highlight for me? And by the way, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, okay? As far as that, what do you think about my red highlight? Like I'm out here for honesty, not necessarily comfort, and that's what the Bible's here for, man. So my yellow highlight, I think for me, it comes right here where Abrams just thinks that his life is at risk right here if Sarah doesn't lie about and say she's his sister, right? And this, we got to think about this, and I'm not, again, it's easy to kind of question Abrams, process here, his thought process, with all of our hindsight. Man, it's hard to be in situations where you feel like your back is against the wall. It doesn't justify what Abram does here, but all I'm saying is, we gotta think more about that, because that's not true, right? I mean, that's not God. Just above, like just yesterday, we read where God says, Abram, I'm giving you this land to you and to your descendants. Well, right now, Abraham doesn't have any kids, okay? So if Abraham dies, God's promise turns out to be lies. And I'm just like, I don't think so. But I gotta think more about that. That's my yellow. And here's my weird green highlight for the day. All right, and see what you think about this too as we tie a ribbon on today. When I highlight this, you're gonna be like, there's something wrong with this guy. But give me a second to explain, okay? I love this moment right here. Here's my green. The Lord sent terrible plagues upon Pharaoh and his household because of Sarah. Abram's wife. Okay, here's things like you're going, what? Look, okay, give me a second. All right. Now, what I'm not saying is that I love the fact that we got the plagues getting unleashed here, but that's not what I'm saying. I don't like seeing anybody suffer. But I do love the fact that God's not giving up on Abram here. He's not giving up on Abram's promise. I mean, Abram kind of gave up on God. Like, hey, well, God said, gave me this promise, but, we're out here at the border, at the checkpoint. We're about to hit Egypt, and God's not here. So we got to figure this out for ourselves, right? Abram kind of gives up on God, but God doesn't give up on him, and he actually intervenes in a pretty powerful way that also reinforces the truth. He knows that Abram puts Sarah in a bad spot, all right? But then the Lord intervenes on her behalf, right? It's because of Sarah. Now it's also because Pharaoh needed to know, hey, that's she's not available, all right? But the Lord steps in here. He intervenes, and it's intense, but it's also grace. This is not the end of Abram's story, not the end of Sarah's story. And it turns out where God's like, I'm gonna intervene here. We're gonna back you up. You going out of Egypt. You don't belong here, and Sarah belongs with you because I have a plan to accomplish with your life. So there's my green. I love that. Now, what about you? It's not Abram's best day, but this is a great day for seeing some clues about what it means to truly have faith and to walk out a life of faith in God, with God. That's what today's reflection is all about. So I've got some reflect and respond moments here and a few other things as well. So I'm going to invite you now to go ahead and dive in, all right? Grab the reading guide, spend some time, scan the QR code there down at the bottom, and we'll get into some more conversation, a little more insights, and unpacking, reflecting a little bit about this wild story from the life of Abraham. All right? So you dive in, and I'll see you, when you're ready to talk more.